this next session is going to be an adoption framework for the modern workplace with Tygraph talking about success and managing success.
Thanks, Joel, and welcome everybody. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. What I'm going to do is talk a little bit about some of the reasons that you would require using analytics and reporting and KPIs and things of that nature to be able to really articulate your mission as well as your progress in regard to deploying teams and then monitoring it over time, which is also another key factor of this. I'm not going to unpack all of what David Chapman spoke about, and I'm always grateful to follow him in any presentation because he really outlays the kind of the process that you're going to undertake. But what we're talking about is specifically, well, how do you measure that? And you're going to get a lot of questions from leadership. It's interesting. Organizations talk about being digitally transformed, but how do they actually physically measure that? Is it are we 20% there? Are we 80% there? And if we're going to put a metric around that, what does that look like? What does success look like? And that's kind of an interesting context-oriented type of question, and really important to be able to drive that. But nowadays, one of the things we're hearing loud and clear is, should we continue to fund these projects? We're cash constrained. Is this something that's really important to the organizational health, considering all the other things that we've got going on? And being able to articulate those value statements through the life cycle of your adoption change management process will allow you to better secure the funds necessary. And what we've also seen in organizations is, that necessity to kind of tin cup budgets across the different parts of the enterprise. So being able to articulate those value statements to not just senior leadership, but also some of the middle management, or depending on the structure of your organization, sometimes it's, a head office and multiple companies that are joined together. So that's one thing. The other thing that we've learned is that data has a shelf life, and so the reports that you create today are going to be something that you're going to want to be able to morph over time, or be able to adjust and to be able to keep up with some of the change in pace. Nothing was more evident to that in the last 5-6 months. The types of reports organizations were asking us to produce changed very fundamentally for a quick period of time, and now we've seemed to have transitioned back to more of the adoption change management type of approach. So the big thing here is your data really needs to tell a story. So we're looking to drive rich visualizations, and really when you think about it, the reason we do analytics, the reason we take Excel and put it into a graph is to more quickly tell your story. And so the thing that we like to advocate as well is, kind of without data, you're just another opinion. So let me give you an example. So this is, kind of the context is critical. Sometimes I call this slide lies, damn lies, and statistics. But really what we're talking about here is, provide the context. So we're showing that engagement has gone up nearly 30%, which is a great storyboard, but we don't have a time context on this. We don't really know, kind of what is underpinning that engagement. So what does that engagement score mean? We do know that we have, a population of around 3,800 people, and 672 are engaged. But in the previous period, we only had 518 engaged. So we've moved the needle forward, which is great. But could we have done better? So just having one simple graphic, which is telemetry based, though it's good because now we have some context, it's not really good enough to be able to really tell that whole story. So that's another key factor when you're looking at developing your visualizations, is to really provide context-oriented visualizations. One of my favorite expressions is from Tom Peters, what gets measured gets done. What's also interesting about introducing a robust analytics platform, be it tyGraph or anything else, is the fact that when people, especially through a change management project, understand that there's some key measures that are happening. One of our favorites is to produce like a leaderboard for senior management. The competitiveness starts to be driven. It's like, you know, having a ball on a field that as soon as you introduce the soccer posts you know, and goals, you're going to change the dynamics of the game and introduce some competitiveness. So that's really some of the things that we think about, you know, as we're starting to analyze the information. So from there, I'm going to jump into a demo. And the first thing I'm going to do is talk a little bit about what ships out of the box. So Microsoft has three solutions for you with regard to analytics. One is in the Admin Center, and it provides administrators the ability to see some telemetry data. The other is actually in Azure, and there's a search capability which goes after the audit logs, where you can pull data from those audit logs, and frankly, that's a lot of where we get our data from. And then the third is usage analytics, and that's what I'm going to show you very briefly here. So first of all, this is visualized in Power BI. So what happens is there's a service that you turn on within the Admin Center. It enables the collection of the data, and then you connect this to a Power BI model. If you are seeing this dashboard, you're in the wrong one. So this is an older version. So if IT happens to pass this over to you, tell them you want something that looks better. And this is the adoption, usage analytics. Used to be called the adoption framework, or sorry, adoption analytics, and now is usage analytics. And in here you have some very good rich information. You can see an executive summary. So workload over workload, you know, what's your mobility presence? How are people adopting OneDrive and SharePoint, Exchange, Teams, Yammer, Skype for Business? From here you can dial into an overview. So the concepts here are to break things down by adoption and then usage. So I can look at my my usage reporting and look at the various workloads as they're being consumed. Communications, etc. So again, encourage you to take a look at this. We can look at licensing, and then finally product usage. And I'm scoped specifically to Teams right here for the purpose of this presentation, but you can take a look at the other tools. The other thing that you will notice is that we have, you know, channels, messages, chats, and so forth. So just giving you a flavor as to what type of activity is going on. And then from a user perspective, we can see, you know, who has, we can sort and pivot here. So who has a total number of activities, not surprising, I do, you know, total number of chat messages, total number of messages, etc. And then we can scroll some of these across. There is a little bit of HR type of information, so we can break this down by department, by country, and then state and city, as well as if there are several companies. We just have a little bit of a problem with our metadata that would be brought in as well. So good information. You know, from a project perspective, it will give you some insights into where you're at. And so often what happens is organizations start here, and again, I encourage you to use it. It's included with your license, so you might as well take advantage of what you have. But then what'll end up happening is organizations start to hit the wall, and that's kind of where we come in from a product perspective. And you know, to use a Microsoft terminology, we are a partner opportunity. So what we're doing is we're kind of closing a gap that exists. Right now, what I'm looking at is the June measures for my my organization. Again, a scope to Teams, and I'll give you the example here. So let's say I'm interested in just kind of what's gone on in July. So I'm going to say is on or after July 1st. And when I hit the apply here, you'll notice that there's no data. So the challenge with with the results that are coming out is, especially at a user level, you're getting this data on a monthly basis. So it's just refreshing into your dashboard, you know, on a monthly basis. So depending on the workload and the type of analysis you're trying to do, you may or may not be able to get that data. And if you're being very prescriptive about the time period you're slicing and so forth, that data may be rolled up in a way that that is not valuable to you. So what we do is we go and collect that data every day. And then we persist it for all time, and we store that data in a database. So here's a different look that we've developed, and to the point I was making earlier about a digital transformation scorecard. What we're doing is we're looking across the organization, and we're seeing from a telemetry perspective, how are we doing? And this scorecard actually has a bit of a weighting system in it. So the challenge you always run into, and as Ron said, we don't think email is ever going to go away anytime soon. We have this 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is email, and then we're trying to advocate, you know, more of a collaborative, working out loud approach to your organizational behavior. And well, how do we do that when email is always taking, you know, the bulk of that graph? So what we've done is we've weighted it such that you know, and the way this scorecarding is working is every user, if they take an email action in a day, let's say they send or receive an email, they're going to get a score of a 1. If they're using more collaborative tools like a SharePoint or a OneDrive, they're going to get a scoring of a 3. But if they're more working out loud using like a Teams or a Yammer, we're going to score them with a 5. So we have this 1, 3, 5 weighting system, and it allows us to very quickly, you know, understand not only the telemetry of what's going on, but you know how much this organization is transforming to be more collaborative and working out loud. The other thing that we're able to do is overlay your metrics. So we can see Skype going down here and then Teams going up. And it was interesting. We had this with a very large international organization on a call this morning, as a matter of fact, and they were trying to understand, okay, well, Skype's gone down, and in their case, they had about 70,000 users. They were down to 2,500 users, and they're like, well, who's still using it, right? So we're able to quickly drill in, and then it was like, well, how are they using it? You know, well, these people are actually still scheduling meetings using Skype, and then these people are having ad hoc sessions using Skype. So again, 2 different types of audiences, and we were able to very quickly go through the organizational structure and determine not only, you know, who is using Skype, how they were using it, as well as understanding, you know, where they were using it, so which departments and divisions, so that they could go talk to that department division leadership and let them know that, hey, you know, it's okay that you're still using Skype, but it's really not okay because we're going to shut it down, and we'd rather not have the lights go out on those users, but we'd rather work with them to get them transitioned over to Teams before we completely shut down Skype. So that's one of the use cases. Another one would be monitoring email. You know, this is, as you can tell, test and fake data because email's going down. But we actually have seen this in organizations where their actual collaboration of email traffic has gone down over time, and then of course the other workloads. Another important aspect of this is the ability to measure it for periods of time. So if I were to look at, say, just a 30-day window now, or I could get very prescriptive and have a real prescriptive from and to date, I'm able to drill down on this and then take a look at, you know, kind of how the pattern looks in a particular month. And of course, I can do that on, you know, any one of these particular visualizations and see, you know, what's going on with Teams versus Skype in this period of time. Obviously, we have weekends in here, so we have, you know, collaborative patterns that are fairly daily, and then so on and so forth. So we can slice this information very quickly and understand, you know, what's going on. And then further to that, the ability to take all those HR facets in here. So as an example, I might want to look at a department, and let's say I am interested in searching on accounting. So this is, all of the departments with the word accounting in them, and I can, go and select them and then take a look at, how is accounting doing in this last 30-day period relative to our goals. So, and we have the ability to do this by pretty much any organizational construct. We get this data either from Azure Active Directory or pull it in from a HR system like a Workday or PeopleSoft, SAP, etc. We'd pull that data in to be able to, for you to really get down and slice, by organizational structure, because when you're having these conversations, you're typically going to be aggregating these individuals into where they work or some other facet to be able to better understand that. So from this transformational scorecard, we break it down. This is an example of doing it by department. Again, we could do it by any other organizational construct, and understanding kind of from a digital transformation score, we see IT is, super up there, which is not shocking. IT often is, and then research and development seems to be up there, and then we kind of have a tail off with the other departments and divisions. So those are your opportunity markets, if you will. Here are the people that from a digital transformation perspective aren't very digitally transformed at all, and of course I can flip this on its head and analyze it from bottom up or top down. So again, we're starting to break down and get into more and more granularity. Now here's another way to take a look at this data. So we're looking in the last 30 days, who's our top teams adopters. So now we're getting down to the member level, so the actual individual user, and we are also understanding not only are they using Teams, but what else are they using? SharePoint, OneDrive, Skype, Yammer, etc. So again, these are our so-called bright lights, or the people that have a lot of activity. And then we can flip this on its head and say, well, what are the individuals who have actually no value no usage of Teams? Again, in the time period that we selected. So in the last month, these individuals have not used Teams, but I might see individuals that are using SharePoint and Yammer and OneDrive. And you'll also see a grouping of individuals that are just purely email only. So, this isn't a hard decision to make. If you're an adoption change management person, are you going to go after all the people that are just ever only using email? Or are you going to go after the people that are already using some of these other collaborative tools? So the idea here is you build cohorts of users to be able to really understand, these people are probably going to have the better propensity to go and adopt these a Teams workload as an example. So I'm going to target them first. So when I bring out my training programs and I bring out my adoption program and whatnot, I'm going to have a punch list of those individuals that I think will probably gravitate to Teams fairly easily, and then leave the laggards to later. Why do you want to do that? Because you want the biggest bang for your buck, right? You want the ability to get at those individuals that that you think will really help propel your project forward. And there are always going to be laggards, and so be it. We'll catch those up later. So from here, we will break it down further and take a look at some of the usage patterns. Again, very similar to what you saw with the usage and adoption metrics. And then again, I'm going to switch my time horizon here to 12 months so you can get a better perspective. So we can see, this is probably when we started our project, and then, adoption curve as it took off. So we measure things like channel messages and so forth, but we also will do things like working out loud scores. So, how many of my messages were actually private chats, in this case 26,000, versus chat messages within Teams and channels. So that's the working out loud versus just one-to-one chat messages, because frankly, if you've deployed Teams and all you get is one-to-one chats from individuals, sort of like Skype chats right back and forth, you've really lost the opportunity of really driving good value from the organization. You may want to understand how are people consuming Teams. Is it the type of client that's being used, be it mobile or a Windows client, and then geographically the spread. Now, this is an IP address. This is based on your location data in Azure Active Directory, but I can do things like take a look at my UK region and see how are we doing in London versus Southampton area. So the ability to break this down by geography and then have an interactive map that users can really understand how Teams is being adopted. So I'll stop there to see if there are any questions. And seeing no hands up, I will continue. So this gives you a flavor as to what's going on. So now let's get into even more of the weeds. To the points that were being made earlier around, we from a governance perspective, we have people that are just like cranking out teams, which are cranking out SharePoint sites, and you get all sorts of clutter oftentimes without any types of control. So you want the ability to understand which teams are being used and which ones are not. Very simple question. So how do you do that? We have this concept, and this goes across all of our products, of a measure of active engagement. So this is just basically an unweighted score of show me where all the activity is. Show me where the, if you will, the buzz is within the with all the teams. And so what we're doing is we're aggregating things like messages and likes and so forth, and we put it together as a scorecard. And then what we can do is take a look at a particular team. So the way this visualization works is the left bold left justified and bold is the team itself, and then there's the channel within the team. So right out of the gate, I can see who my team owners are. We have a little helper here with email, so if you want to talk to any one of the owners, you can quickly punch out that email address. On Hover, I will see other things, like I want to see what's behind this particular team and channel. So we can see we have a number of tabs that have been created. So wiki tabs, and which is the default, and everybody deletes it after they start. But tasks, and well, that tab happens to be hooked to Planner. So that's interesting. We've got videos that's hooked to Stream, Power BI reports that have been set up, et cetera, et cetera. So excuse me. The idea here is that we'll be able to give you more insight into what's going on with your teams and channels. And then similarly, what we will do is do the inverse of this and look at those teams that have 0 May scores. So I want to take a look at this team and see maybe what's been set up. In this case, we have a planner and we have a comms a link to a website and a OneNote, but that's it. There are no team activities and so forth. I know who the owners are, so I can reach out to them and say, Bertram, do you really need this team anymore, or can we just blow it away? We also give you a little helper link that's going to get over to that team so that you can go take action on it should you choose to do so. So this is one way to start through the visualizations, just giving you a grounding as to what's going on network-wide. People were mentioning they have over 1,000 teams already. So this will give you a really quick way to be able to understand kind of what's turned on and what isn't. Then we start to look at other types of measurements. So we're trending now towards quality of engagement. So how are people actually working and collaborating together within teams? Again, looking at the last year, this particular team, has, from an interactions perspective, jumped to the top. Well, kind of who's working with whom, and how does that dynamic work? So you see Coleman here and Malvina are working a lot together, and Katrina and Coleman are also working together, and so this is obviously one of the influencers, but we see Dane over here who's really only had a couple of interactions in the last year, so not really participating very much. So that gives us some insight in terms of who's popular, if you will, in the team, or who's interacting with it, and who is it. Another thing that we like to do is kind of track this over time. So we're seeing what type, when was this team really active. So we're playing out the activity, and of course the general tab is getting a lot of love, if you will, throughout the time. But we see topics coming up here, we see events, and this may be correlated to certain activities that may be happening as the subject of the team. where we found some value in that internally was that we, of course, have different types of tyGraph products that we have different ship cycles associated to them. And what we noticed when we were looking at this data is that, if we had tyGraph for Teams going out the door, you see this massive spike in that team channel, and then it dropped off, and then tyGraph for SharePoint went out the door, and then it would also drop off. So there was a high correlation between our ship cycles and the activities that were going on within teams and channels. So we can kind of play that out over time and just see, we saw a little spike in support. Well, that might tell a story, right? So again, just another way to look at your data and have it start telling you stories. Now this one is a newer visualization that we've brought forward, and it kind of takes that whole member interaction look of things to the next level. So now at a network level, we're looking at how people are working together. So we call it a hidden network. It was the best name we could come up with for this. And the idea here behind this is very simple. There's kind of that organizational hierarchy, and that's how traditionally we think of people working together. But the reality is that's not at all how they work together. We may work in a completely different pattern. And this is another way of analyzing how people are working. But more importantly, from an adoption change management perspective, we want to look for orphans, right? So we want to look for these people that, are kind of, staying among themselves within teams and channels. Again, could be completely appropriate. It could be finance and legal, where they're just communicating directly, and that's completely appropriate. But again, from an ACM perspective, it just gives us a different lens. And sometimes your champions show up here, and you want to, really understand who they are and how they're interacting with individuals, and maybe have a conversation around that type of thing. And then I can also take a look at a particular team and channel. So this is the one we had looked at before. What this is showing me is that we have some very good, we don't have anybody who's kind of been left out of the loop. We have, a lot of strong conversation between a couple of individuals here, which we had seen before, Malvina and Katrina and Coleman. Those people are, we had seen in the heat map previously, but this just tells us the amount of traffic between those individuals. But a good healthy team, and that's the type of thing that we would be looking for more globally. Then we take it another step further and understand sentiment tracking. This was super important during the initial periods of COVID. Organizations wanted to understand, first of all, did we lose people from our networks, people that had previously been, engaged with Teams or Yammer, SharePoint, OneDrive, and it just kind of fell off the map. So we created a bit of a churn report. And then the other thing that we did was use sentiment analysis, and I'll show you some of the things that we built out over the last couple of months in that regard. But this is simply taking a look at sentiment trends over time. So you can't see your staff. You want to know kind of how things are going. How are people feeling is the way it was presented to us, which is a very hard question to answer. So the way we do it is we take your channel messages, we send it out to Microsoft Cognitive Services. It scores them, 1 being the most positive, and then 0 being the most negative. And then somewhere in the middle, 0.5, it really doesn't understand what is positive or negative. So we're trending this out over time, and then we can take a look at a particular team to see, is the conversation going more positive or going more negative? In this case, it's kind of neutral. If I were to take another team, we could see again kind of flat line. So this is another way of looking at things. Now the other thing that we've noticed, and I love Joel's iceberg photo, which is like all of these different things that happen within teams and channels. One of them is activity around SharePoint. So as part of the visualizations that we're pulling in, we're also taking a look at those that are groups that are assigned to teams. So now I've been able to pull in all the SharePoint file activity, page activity, internal or external users, and I can look at a particular team and see how how that team is trending with regard to file activity. So it's more than just teams and channels, it's more than chat messages and so forth. It's also some of these other telemetry items that you want to pull in around, how people are using groups and communicating and so forth. And then finally, one of the things that is super important from you from an adoption change management perspective is understanding influencers. So this is actually a weighted algorithm. And the way it works is this: we look at not only how much activity you have, which would be the the thing. Oh, Ron's got a lot of activity, so he must be a champion in my network. Well, maybe, but the other thing that we're looking at is, if I'm posting in the network, are people responding to my teams and channels? Are they what's the breadth of which I'm posting? Am I just like in one channel or in multiple teams, multiple channels? How many people are we interacting with? Is it just me and Joel back and forth, or is it the entire organization that I'm working with? So we created this scoring algorithm, and that allows you to quickly look at who across all of your organization might be an influencer. Again, I can do this by department, or I can take a look at a particular team and learn that in this team, these are my influencers, whereas in the Tiki Industries team, it's a different list. So as you identify those champions and use that to help drive that whole ACM strategy or OCM strategy, it's something that can really help you. And then, kind of message contribution over time. But another thing that we get asked is, what time of day is my network or my team's network busy? So we can take a look and aggregate. So over the last year, we can see in UTC, about 6 p.m. seems to be the time that this particular network is most busy. And then I can take that and say, well, between teams and channels, which one is most busy? Well, in this particular team, we're looking, kind of more between 2 and 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. a little bit less so. So ways to be able to analyze your data to answer questions, perhaps that you haven't even been asked yet. And going really quickly here. So this was the chart that I put up in my PowerPoint, which is, we've in the last 90 days gone up almost 30%. And, we showed the metrics here. We have 672 currently. We're measuring the previous. So this is actually a 180-day look. We're looking at the previous 90 days and peeling that out and saying we had 518 people engaged. Now we have 672. And you walk into leadership and say, hey, this is great. We're up almost 30%. And they say, yeah, but what I'm hearing is that people, are starting to use Teams and they're dropping off. And this is where this churn report really becomes important. Looking that we had 154 people lost and 308 gained. So, we've lost almost as many as we've gained. And even though we've grown by 30%, we have a lot of churn. And it was interesting. We were talking to a company who was a bank in Australia, and this is how quickly you can get those people back on the wagon, so to speak. They were looking at their churn report and they started reaching out to users, and guess what the problem was? Users were confused as what to use when, right? This is, we've got Yammer, we've got Teams, we got SharePoint, we got OneDrive. We don't know what to use. So yeah, we saw the training, we thought it was really cool, but we just decided to do nothing because we were confused as to what to do. So they, created some comms, and within a very narrow window of time, about 2-3 week period, they kind of did a reintroduction, did some communications around what to use when, and they were able to bring those people back in. So even though we were showing potentially a 30% increase, had we brought the whole 500 people forward as opposed to, or 450 people forward, as opposed to just gaining 300 and losing 150, that score could have been exponentially higher, right? So context is super important when we're dealing with this kind of stuff. Just one last visualization to leave you with, keyword analysis, and this was to the point I was making earlier about people are asking, well, how do people feel in the organization through the work from home types of scenarios, or shelter in place is another term, COVID, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, when we built our data set, we didn't have any of those words in our lexicon. So I'm using product as an example, but we can do simple things like a word cloud, and, you know, allow you to see, you know, COVID. Well, when they're talking about COVID, what else were they talking about? Were they talking about shelter in place? Were they showing pictures of their desks and you know, that type of thing? When did that word enter the lexicon of the organization? And what was kind of fascinating was, you know, because we deal with a lot of global organizations, we could actually see, you know, transitions of, you know, conversations were happening in Asia, then they were happening in Europe, and then North America. It almost followed the pattern of the COVID pandemic spread, and just as people were talking about it, and then we threw sentiment analysis as an overlay on top of that. So just taking that signal and understanding kind of how people were using it in that context, and then, you know, bringing out some of the other pieces of information to be able to blow that out and really give people an organizational view as to how people were feeling, which was something that, you know, we had never considered 6 months ago. But we're able to do it with the data that we had in our product. So with that, I'm at time, and I will stop there and ask for questions.
This is Jose from Cedric. I don't really have a question. All I have to say is just wow.
Oh, thank you.
That is some granular reporting right there. Big Brother is definitely watching.
Oh, and on that note, we can obfuscate everything if you want. You know, so from a GDPR perspective, we can opt people out. We can obfuscate their data, their PII information. There's all that level of trust that we can put in here.
Oh, okay, that's good to know too. Awesome, thank you.
Other thing, from a governance perspective, we can deploy this either in your tenant space or as a SaaS model. We have about 20% of our customers have it in their tenant space. The other 80% have it in our model. And I didn't cover pricing. I have a PowerPoint because I attend a lot of these presentations and people always avoid the price, which I find is kind of useless. But, you know, round numbers, about $1 per user per year, about 8 cents per user per month. We do build in a pricing discount schedule over around 11,000 employees is the threshold. So if you get into 25,000 users, you get a 10% discount. 50,000 users, about a 20% discount on that. If you get into well over 100,000 users, you can get as much as a 60% discount. So that is for just the Teams product. And then we have an all-you-can-eat license, which we call our enterprise license, and what it includes is all of the SKUs. So, you know, Pulse, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, Yammer. We also have a commitment that as we bring new products into the system, if you're an enterprise license customer, we're not going to ding you for it. We're going to include that as part of that overall licensing. So, you know, it may be a little biased here, but we've been told by customers, you know, kind of a very affordable solution. When you look at the cost of a Microsoft E3, 5, or even F1, E1 Cal, we're like a 0.000% of that a license spend. So, you know, if you can get value from, you know, a return on investment, by driving more adoption or managing your licenses appropriately, you know, that's something that will provide a quick ROI for you.
Very good, Ed.
Thanks, Joel.
Yeah. You know, I think that it's one of those things where if you don't measure it, you just don't know. And I absolutely believe that people need to establish a baseline. You know, what good is an adoption program if you really can't tell where you're at?
Mm-hmm. I guess we should probably talk a little bit about, you know, how we work with Perficient. So we are very much a pure play ISV player, meaning we're a software vendor. We do not do services. We used to do 6 years ago, but we don't do that anymore. So where we work with a company like Perficient is providing you we'll help with, as an example, some of those visualizations. You want to do a custom visualization based on a point you're at in the project or something like that. We may assist in that regard, but it's ultimately Perficient that's guiding this. And one of the offers that we have is that if you're engaged with Perficient, that we'll give you like a 60-day pilot. And to Joel's point around benchmarking, right? So we'll drop in tyGraph and just kind of let it run. So as David Chapman's team is doing the interviews and gathering up all the information on from a change management perspective and working with you, we drop this thing in and it's collecting data in the background. So typically we can go back about a month, round numbers, for a lot of the data sets. Some of them, because they're activity and audit level data, we can only go back a few days. But if you let it run for a period of time, then you're going to have the ability to see kind of what your trend line is. So running in parallel, that's one of the things that we do offer as working with a partner like Perficient.
Any other questions for Ed?
No, this is Pamela. I want to say that I've already reached out to my security and compliance people with this.
Awesome.
This is crazy.
And on that level, we have a compliance document, which I can send along through Perficient. It's about 20 pages, and it outlines, as you can appreciate, given what we do for a living, the first thing that comes up is, who has the data, what do you do with it, who owns the data, all that kind of stuff. We've created a white paper that breaks all that out for you and eases those conversations.